Hey, what's up, podcast listeners? Andy and Drew here. We are back. Welcome to episode 34 of the What's Up Castleberry podcast. Andy, you and I are pumped. We've got a great conversation today. Love talking all things Castleberry with you. What is new? How are you?
Drew, that is 2 weeks in a row where you have sung the intro, and we haven't had any complaints yet, but I'm sure it's only a matter of time. Either that or we're going to get phone calls from American Idol saying, who is that guy?
That's my audition tape, maybe one day. We are back. Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. But I'm doing well. It's good to be on the pod. I'm excited about the interview that we have coming up with two folks who are making a big difference in our county, and two folks who very generously shared their platform and their spotlight with us as they interviewed us for the Lake Mary Publishers magazine and the Castleberry version of that. So, Drew, I'm doing well, but I hear you have had some big news in your week as well. Would you care to share that with our listeners?
I absolutely will. Thank you. This past week, my wife Becky and I were very blessed. Many of you know that we have adopted our son, Jalen. He was born on May 7th, and he's been in our care, but in the state of Florida, there's a process about 90 days or so where there's some home study visits and just making sure, confirming that we are qualified and good, caring parents, which thanks to my wife, Becky, we checked that box. This past week was really a celebration as our adoption was finalized, and Jalen officially has our last name of Taylor. Legally, officially, he's 4 months old, but I told him, son, you were not technically on the grid. You had no social security number, no birth certificate. You could have committed all kinds of crimes, but now I'm sorry, you're one of us. But it's a joy. We had a celebration and just a nice family time together. It was great.
Well, congratulations. I think those who adopt are doing a beautiful and noble thing. I've thought that for a long time, and both you and Becky just support that assumption because your generosity and love is a wonderful thing for us to see. And we can't wait to walk with you as little Mr. Taylor grows.
Yeah, well, you guys have. I mean, and in fact, one of the first people that reached out to us post-adoption finalization was the principal, Mallory Lambert of Castleberry Elementary School, and just another testament to the great community we live in. If you get involved, it really feels like a community, like a family. And so having people, in influential positions here in the community making an effort to say, hey, welcome, Jalen, really made us feel special. Andy, for our Castleberry in the News story, this, not going to lie, I kind of laughed out loud when I read the article. Andy and I typically will go back and forth with producer Robin as well. We like to just share different things we read. Maybe it's on social media, maybe it's in the news, something we hear. Sometimes it's serious and very impactful to all of us as a community. Other times it's just noteworthy to highlight what has occurred. Well, this is one of those stories. There was a story recently that came out, and here was the title: security guard arrested for pulling over an off-duty Orlando police officer in Castleberry. Let me read that article again. So a security guard determined to arrest an off-duty Orlando police officer in our great city of Castleberry. Andy, will you flesh out some of the details?
I actually think it wasn't an Orlando police officer. It was a Castleberry police officer who was undercover going home from his shift and got pulled over. So on Redbug Lake Road, some security guard, I don't know, maybe he had a tough day or a great day, but he had his security guard uniform on and felt very empowered, turned his little lights on and, pulled over this cop who was on his way home. And the policeman kind of got suspicious when it got a little bit weird, the protocols. And it turns out that this guy had pulled over an actual cop. And I believe he got arrested for impersonating a police officer, which is a big offense and something you don't want to do. So yeah, crazy story. I'm not sure what the lesson is. I think one is, if you're going to pretend to be a police officer, be careful who you pretend to be a police officer for, which is not really the lesson. The lesson is obviously be who you are, not who you're not. The police have enough trouble and responsibility and hard work keeping our society safe as it is. And imitators of them actually make that job harder. So that's one of the lessons for me. What about you? After your laughter died down a little bit, were there any lessons you learned from that story?
Yeah, well, a quick tangent and then a lesson. So when I was in high school, our youth minister had, we had the typical 15 passenger van where we would go on retreats and different trips with our youth group. And he had this amazing ability to roll down the window and make a very loud whistling sound that sounded like the lights going off. And every once in a while, as kind of a joke, he would drive up and I'm calling him out right now on the podcast, but he would make that sound, and occasionally people would like pull over to the side thinking there was a police officer behind them because they heard the sound of like a siren, and then we would drive past. I don't believe he does that anymore. But the lesson is that, Andy, you and I represent, love, encourage, support our local police. And even in this story, to read in which the Castleberry police officer that was pulled over sounded like he was vigilant, he was careful to do the right thing, followed protocol, and took care of business. And so just another reason to be thankful that we live in Castleberry with such an amazing police force. And I think that's a perfect segue just to highlight the fact that we are having September 27th. There will be, and Andy and I will share it on the What's Up Castleberry page, a conversation with local police in an ongoing series about race and reconciliation and moving together as a community. And that includes police officers moving towards its citizens. So perfect segue, ties in beautifully. Let's take a quick moment to shift gears and answer a listener question. Love hearing from our listeners, those who check into the program. You can reach us through a number of mediums. You can go to our Facebook or Instagram page, both at What's Up Castleberry, or you can go to our website, whatsupcastleberry.com, and there you can leave a comment or review. You can also go to our podcast feed as well. Well, today's listener question, Andy, is something right in our wheelhouse. It says, hey guys, love your leadership quotes and your recommended reading during your episodes. What are you guys reading right now?
I've always got an answer for that question. Right now, I have just finished a book that I would highly recommend. I think I spoke about it on a pod a couple of weeks ago, called Upstream by Dan Heath, which talks about how we need to go to the source of problems and solve them there, so we're not just treating symptoms. It's on the New York Times bestseller list, one of the Amazon best business books of the year. It really was very thought-provoking. I am currently reading a book called Captivate, where the subtitle is The Science of Succeeding with People by Vanessa Van Edwards. It's about body language, first impressions, that kind of stuff. And one of the reasons I'm reading it is because I speak to people now who are wearing masks, which makes communication a lot harder. So I'm trying to learn, how can I be stronger and clearer in some of those nonverbals, the eyes, the hands, the expressions, when people can't read my lips and my mouth as much. So that's interesting. Also working on another little devotional book called The Intentional Remnant, which is written by a friend of Tracy and mine called Marilyn Andrews, and we're enjoying that as well. What about you?
I've got two books in my queue right now. First, I'm reading a book called Created for Connection by Dr. Sue Johnson. And this is it is about communication. It's about emotionally relating both in marriage, but also with close friends and others that you have deep relationships with. The idea is essentially we were made for relationships with one another. We were created to be connected. And so identifying our story, our circumstances that affect the way that we connect with others, as well as inviting us to have a new path forward and moving closer together with those that you love and care for in your life. I'm also reading just a really short book on grief by Norman Wright. I can't remember the title, but Norman Wright is the author. It's on grief. It's just a really there's this helpful analogy of a ball of twine that has all these different emotions: anger, discouragement, fear, anxiety. And rather than trying to fix grief by completely removing all of those things, instead kind of pull at one specific emotion that you're feeling. So I'm in touch with my emotional side, Andy, between the two books there. Thank you for the question, listener, and we would love to hear from other listeners in the future. All right, today's sponsor continues to be All In Construction. All In Construction with our good friend, Kenzie Lolifin, who was a recent podcast guest, shares that they are about offering beautiful home remodeling, renovations, and additions. All In Construction's been around Central Florida since 2008. They're locally owned and operated. They're a member of the Castleberry Chamber of Commerce, and they are all about helping with your remodel needs. Everybody's at home more often right now. Everybody's looking at possible remodel. Update your home. Check out allinconstruction.com. We'll be back with our guest.
Hi, welcome back, listeners. This is our favorite part of the show where we talk to folks much more interesting than Drew and I. And today on the show, we have some incredibly interesting, thoughtful guests, Chip and Georgia from the Altamont Wekiva Life magazine, who have covered many great stories over their careers in journalism and recently stooped to a new low as they interviewed us. But they did a great job and made us sound good. So we thought that we would return the favor, try and share with you, our listeners in Castleberry, about this great magazine that helps us understand a little bit about what's happening in Seminole County, in our area, and in our city. So welcome, Georgia and Chip.
Thank you for having us.
We like to start our guests by putting them at ease and doing kind of like a little rapid fire round, okay? Drew and I will ask you a question, and we're really looking for a 1 or 2 word answer to this, just so that our listeners can get to know you and we can all relax a little bit before we jump in, although I don't think that will be a problem. So Drew, do you want to start with our first icebreaker question?
Our first question is regarding just kind of the way in which you read. Favorite reading format? Chip, we'll start with you. Ebook, paperback, hardback, or other?
There's only one right answer. Magazines is the only correct answer to this question, of course. But truth be told, probably ebook. I have more Kindles in my house than there are people. So I guess I have to go. When I'm not reading magazines, I got to say ebook.
Very nice. What about you, Georgia?
Yeah, I'm with Chip. I'm big on magazines. But I will say I have my magazines through an app called I'm trying to think of the name, but I read my magazines online, some of them, and then also I have a Kindle, which I'm addicted to, and I probably read a book every 2 weeks. So ebooks and magazines for sure.
Both given incredibly predictable answers to that question. Let's see if we can dig a little deeper. Beyond your own, what is your favorite magazine? Chip, we'll start with you.
Well, this answer will be a little bit more interesting. I have to confess that I'm, a video game sort of nerd, grown up, adult game nerd at heart. So there's a magazine that I subscribe to that I love. It's called Nintendo Force. And anybody kind of my generation might remember when they were kids, Nintendo Power magazine. That was kind of the thing when Nintendo was at the height of its prominence, and they stopped publishing that. So the fan community has really taken it over. And so now there's a guy out there that publishes Nintendo Force magazine in the same sort of spirit as Nintendo Power. Interesting business model. He does it all through Patreon now, which is really fascinating to see how he's been able to build it that way. Just a fun magazine. And like Nintendo Power, it comes with a poster every issue that usually ends up in one of my girls' rooms. So
I love it. Pick. Georgia, I suspect that's not your favorite magazine.
I would know nothing about that, not even the slightest. For me, I would say I remember the name now. The app I use is called Flipster, and I have to give a plug for the Seminole County Public Library because I use a lot of their free digital resources. But on that app, I read Reader's Digest, mainly for the humor section. And then I do love it in print because I love that it's kind of fun-sized and the content is just so mixed. And I love the variety of that one. And then recently, my parents kind of put me onto a magazine called Forum, which is, I'm getting more interested in history, the history of the state of Florida. And Forum is all about the state of Florida and like what makes our state special, what's going on in our state. They do special editions. So they did one on democracy in Florida. They did one on films that were shot in Florida. So I think that comes out 3 times a year. It's also free, like our magazines, which is always a plus. And I think the content's really rich. And it's a slow read because it's so dense with history, but it's a good one.
Wow, that's super interesting. I'm be interested in that one. Chip, a real quick Nintendo Power aside, we are probably similar generations. I have a very fond memory of my dad and I having that magazine. We played Mike Tyson Punch-Out, a boxing game.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, and it was all about getting that code to be able to skip the boxers so you could get to the end of the game. Oh, yeah.
Hey, Drew, can Georgia and I join this conversation? I mean, we're totally lost.
We'll go back to books, to writing, to interviews, since that's what we're about here. Georgia, we'll pose the question to you. Any historical figure, who would be your number one interview? Who would you love to have a conversation with?
Well, I've just recently fallen in love with Bill Gates. I know he's iconic and everybody knows him, but
he's still alive as well, Georgia.
Well, I know, and I actually researched, can a historical figure still be alive?
Yes, I guess I can. Yeah.
Part of the, of my own research, and I think the answer is yes. But he's just fascinating. I think he's my kind of guy. He just seems down to earth. He loves to read, he loves food, and he loves storytelling, which we both obviously would have in common as someone who works and lives and breathes the magazine world. I mean, outside of his, what he's done with Microsoft and the personal computer, he's an amazing philanthropist, and he's pledged to give half his wealth to, philanthropic causes. And, of course, the Gates Foundation is just doing phenomenal work, and he does great work currently with all the COVID-19 research, and his impact is just huge. Only recently I've been reading his blog, and that's where I've realized you get a little glimpse of who he really is. I would definitely go with Bill Gates.
Chip, what about you?
Well, I majored in economics when I was in college, and economics was sort of always my first, academic kind of love, right? So, I'd have to go back and say like Adam Smith, the father of economics, John Maynard Keynes, sort of his counterpart. We really defined modern economics. So if I could sit down with the two of those guys and just kind of pick their brains and let them duke it out for a little while, that would be phenomenal.
Fantastic. Good answers. We all are off the hot seat. Great, thorough, thoughtful answers there. We'll jump into kind of talk about Lake Mary life. Chip, could you give us maybe a little bit of a background? And Georgia, please weigh in on the history and just the impact of the magazine and kind of its purpose.
Yeah, so our company is Lake Mary Life Publishing. And within that company, there are 4 magazines, Lake Mary Life, Oviedo Winter Springs Life, and Altamont Wekiva Springs Life, which of course covers the cities of Altamont, Longwood, and the great city of Castleberry. And then we also publish J Life magazine for the Jewish community throughout Central Florida. So Lake Mary Life was the first, and it started about 17 years ago. Sheila and Michael Kramer are the founders. They're longtime Lake Mary residents. And they started the magazine on their dining room table. First issue was 24 pages. It started really small, but Sheila just believed that community of Lake Mary, which was really burgeoning back at that time, just needed a community magazine. So they started it. Every issue has grown. We're very fortunate now to publish the largest magazines in Central Florida. And again, it includes all four of those. And Altamont-Wekiva Springs Life is one of the newest. J-Life is brand new, but Altamont-Wekiva Springs Life is relatively new because we wanted to complete that Seminole County sort of picture. And there's just so much going on, especially in Castleberry. You know, Altamont is a phenomenal community, very dynamic, but very, very established. Castleberry is one of those places that just has so much happening. The art scene, lots of school activity that, of course, we cover and things like that. And so much that we really get to sink our teeth into. So my role in the company is I'm the associate publisher of all the other magazines and the publisher of Altamont-Wekiva Springs Life. And then George is the associate editor of all those magazines. So we get to cover the whole county and really all of Central Florida a little bit. But with Altamont-Wekiva Springs Life specifically, we can dig in and cover Castleberry and all the great neighborhoods that are around there.
Well, we're grateful for that. And we heard recently you had a great article about a great Castleberry podcast. So we thank you for that. Georgia, when you're writing and publishing and editing and photoshopping and designing and all that kind of stuff, who are you writing for? Who's your target demographic? Who's in that sweet spot?
Well, as Chip said, we cover all of Seminole County, so that is about 60 to 65,000 families that we reach. Of course, we are hyper-local, like we mentioned, so each magazine is really catered to the people who live within those cities. So, for example, Altamont-Wekiva Springs Life would be Altamont Springs, Wekiva Springs, Castleberry, and some parts of Longwood. So, we're writing to really all the residents. Obviously, we speak maybe more to families and to adults because they are the ones who receive the magazine in the mail. But our magazines are interesting because if you look at it, the way our magazines laid out, we have the around town section where you can see what's going on, what events have happened, what events are coming up. In the calendar section, you can see that what businesses are opening up nearby. And then we do healthy living, and then we do the family fair section, which is basically anything going on in the schools. And then kind of what I love are the feature stories, which is just the heart and soul of people and just showcasing here's what's going on in our hometown, and we want people to be proud of where they're from and know about their neighbors. So the reach is big.
I love that. Georgia, kind of along those lines then, what would you say, just being a part of a hyper-local magazine focused primarily on Seminole County, what is a real strength of the magazine that is different from kind of a bigger, more statewide or national magazine?
I would say that what makes us different is that people can open up our magazines and say, that's me, or that's my friend, or there's some connection. There's a connection of the heart to the pages of our magazine. And I don't think national magazines can do that. Our content is truly unique. You will not find it anywhere else. I believe that. I mean, Chip, you might want to chime in as well on that.
Yeah, the beat, I guess. I mean, what we sort of call our content is positive community news. And that's really what separates us. We don't do crime. We don't cover politics. We don't do those things. It's extraordinary stories that are happening from the regular people that you may have around you. And of course, the secret to that is there's no regular people around you. Everybody is extraordinary and they have their own extraordinary talents and stories to tell and things like that. And there's no way that bigger regional, state, national magazines can dive into those things the way that we can because we're hyper-local. So that positive community news angle is really what separates us and gives us the opportunity to tell the stories not only of the residents, but of local businesses too. And that, of course, is a critical part of our business model.
Can I confess that when my magazine comes in the mail, my wife and I have a little guessing game as to how many people will recognize in it? Does anyone else do that? Have you heard that before?
Yeah, and actually, that's really the ethos of the magazine, sort of the founding principle was we want you to open it up and see your neighbors and see yourself and your neighbors and your friends. And the joke that we make is when we do a story about you in the magazine, we want it to be where you go out to check your mail after it comes out. And then your neighbor's walking down the street and says, "Oh my gosh, I saw you in Altamont, Wekiva Springs Life." That's the goal. We sometimes people call us, I don't know that I love this analogy, but folks call us the people magazines of Seminole County, right? And, it fits. But again, it's because we want to not make people famous in their own communities, but we want you to see yourself. We want you to see your neighbors. There's no other format that can really deliver that. And that's really the secret sauce that makes our magazine special.
That's great. I thought I saw some paparazzi hanging around the Searles house the other day. Just Life magazine. Yeah. Speaking of stories, I imagine are some very interesting features or potential leads that go through your desk. Is there something maybe recently, just an interesting, unique, or even favorite story that you've written?
We just sat down. We live in the future, we like to say, because our magazines come out every 2 months, right? So we recently just sat down to discuss what's going to be in our November, December issue. And so that editorial planning is always fun because, like you said, the stuff floats, pops up to the surface. So one thing that was really fascinating to me is there's a coffee shop. It's in Sanford, but a coffee shop called Palette Coffee. And they are a nonprofit organization that supports human trafficking relief and support, and victims of human trafficking can come to them and they fund programs that can rescue them and help them. And then at the same time, we just got a press release just yesterday, I think, Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, about another organization that was going to open a human trafficking rescue center here in Seminole County. And it just sort of struck me that it's so interesting that Central Florida is an area where human trafficking is a problem just because of the tourism industry, and so many people kind of flow through our community, and those tend to be areas where human trafficking becomes a concern. But even still, it was fascinating to me that Seminole County has sort of become kind of this epicenter for human trafficking support and relief and rescue. And I just thought that was really, it just surprised me. You would think it would be such an Orlando kind of thing. So right now we're kind of investigating, why that is. Why is it that Seminole County is kind of becoming the place where so many good people are doing so much good work to save and support folks who've been victims of human trafficking. So that, talking about recently, that just jumped out to me, yesterday we were talking about that.
Chip, it's almost like Orange County has the problems and we have the solutions here in Seminole.
It's possible. And I don't know this. And so I want to be very careful as I sort of do some conjecture on this. But one of the ideas that crossed my mind was it is possible that where human trafficking itself might be sort of a big city problem, right? And, again, Orlando, for all the reasons we just discussed, may have the problem, as you said. It's possible, and again, I'm just guessing, but it's possible that maybe they're trying to establish the rescue and support mechanisms outside the big city, just to sort of physically separate from an area where the crimes are being committed and where the danger most exists, and set up the support mechanism a little bit off that beaten path. Now, again, that's a guess. I don't know. We're looking into it now. But what I do know is that there are a lot of wonderful, amazing, kind-hearted people in Seminole County who are, out of the goodness of their hearts, really making a very sad and tragic thing sort of their life's work.
Just to piggyback on that, I've done a few stories on Palette Coffee Brewery. So it's incredible what they're doing. The owners, Tina and Carl Kadoff, just devoted to the cause, and they have a coffee shop, and 100% of the proceeds go towards the human trafficking. And as Chip described, they're now building what they call a life center. So yes, that's a great story. And one that I just assigned myself to today. So I don't know like a ton of details, but I love epic stories and stories of people who just kind of do outrageous things because they're just so passionate and they have this mission that drives them. So I'm doing a story on, she's a Sanford, African-American local business owner in Sanford, but she's also a big biker, like motorbiking, and she's biked across this country, across 48 states, I believe she's done it twice, but she's now doing it again, I believe, to be part of one, to be in a Netflix series. So she's part of a series. I don't know exactly what it's about. I'm speaking to her tomorrow. And then two, she's been inspired by another African-American figure who did something similar in a time when it was a lot more difficult to basically be on the streets and crossing the country in a safe way. So she was going by the Green Book, which is this book that many African Americans had on safe places that they could rest when they would journey from place to place. So I'm working on that story. She sounds fascinating, and I believe she's getting the woman she's writing in sort of in honor of is being inducted into the Harley-Davidson Hall of Fame. So people do amazing things, and it's just every time. I've been doing this for 5 years, Chip even longer, and I'm always like, where do these people come from? How do they do these things? Like every magazine, I'm either crying or smiling or laughing, and that's why we love it.
I love that both those stories contain many fascinating aspects of all great stories, right, Chip?
Yeah, and I'll even give you a couple of others that I was thinking about, and one especially specific to Castleberry. But one story that I did personally that really was one of my favorites was Honor Flight of Central Florida. And that's a tremendous organization. And what they do is they find and connect with veterans, military veterans going as far back as World War II veterans. That's really how it got started. And they gather these folks and fly them to Washington, D.C. for a day, completely free of charge, of course, to the veteran. And now they've expanded not only to World War II, but of course, Korean War, Vietnam, the Desert Storm, all that. And then, of course, other modern activities in Afghanistan and everything as well. So I got to go on an honor flight a couple of years ago. And just as they wanted to send someone like as a media person, right, to kind of capture the experience and sort of tell the story. So I got to join the veterans, and each veteran is paired with a buddy. And, the buddy is the one who donates not only their time, but some money as well to fund these activities. And they go up with the veteran and escort them to D.C. And the whole point of this is they send these veterans to Washington, D.C. to visit the monuments that were built to honor them. So especially World War II veterans, obviously there just aren't that many of them left. So Honor Flight considers it so essential to get them up to D.C. to see the World War II monument. And of course, same for Vietnam and Korea. So that was a tremendous experience for me because I got to go on the flight, and I was just there, me and my camera, there to just capture the scenes that I could and just experience it. And the way they do it is absolutely amazing. It's a chartered bus, and you get police escorts through Washington, D.C. So, you haven't lived until you're on the Beltway and you've got cops surrounding your bus with lights and sirens going, and like Moses parting the Red Sea, all the cars in front of you just get out of the way so that the veterans can not be stuck in traffic and make the most use of their time. So highly emotional, just, to see a, 90-something-year-old World War II veteran just break down in tears, when he's there at the memorial and things, to get to tour Vietnam Memorial, which I saw as a kid, but, to get to do it as an adult was very moving. And then the most incredible part, and I didn't know, I knew what the organization was about, but I didn't know how these trips went when I got into it, right? So we fly back and we, leave at like 6 a.m. I got to the airport at 4 a.m. We ended up flying back. It's like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. And the organizer kind of taps me on the shoulder and he's like, hey, make sure you're kind of at the front of the line to get off the plane. I'm like, okay, whatever. Yeah. And so we get off and there are hundreds and hundreds of people, local folks at the airport throwing this huge party to welcome these veterans back from their trip. So music's blaring, people waving flags and signs and handing out treats and thank you cards to the veterans as they walk by. I did not see it coming at all and was just completely floored by it. So that was a story. And one of the veterans was from Altamont Springs, so obviously we highlighted him in Altamont Springs Life. So that was just incredibly moving. And one of the favorite stories I've done personally. And then another, I didn't write it, but I was proud that I had a hand in putting it together, was the Orlando Scrabble Club. And that was on the cover of Altamont Springs Life a few years ago. And of course, the club is headquartered there at Werds Park. So that was a ton of fun. So many local folks. The epicenter of Central Florida Scrabble is in Castleberry. Just such a Castleberry thing. I thought it was so cool. So those are two of my favorites.
Chip, those are fantastic stories. And I think as I've received the magazine over the years, those little local stories are so inspirational, and they remind us of the worth of people and the stories that people have to tell. And I love that you're able to catch them and to share them and to use them to strengthen our community. Thank you both so much for what you do. The good news is we're going to make this a two-parter. And so as you've received some inspiration from Georgia and Chip today, the good news is that you can tune in next week and hear more about the secret sauce that is strengthening our community. Chip and Georgia, thank you so much for being with us in this first episode.
All right. Thank you to Georgia and Chip for part one. Be prepared, listeners, for part two of that conversation. What great interviewees. They had some very insightful, engaging conversations that were inspiring. Andy, I can only hope, my friend, that you are prepared to inspire us as we close out our episode today.
Well, I'll try, but I tell you, some of the conversations that they were sharing about some local heroes really were fantastic. What a great county we live in, what a great city we're part of, and what a great community to call home. But today's quote comes from Charles Chuck Swindoll, who said, "Life is 10% what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it." Think about that. Life is 10% what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it. Now, I'm pretty sure that's not a scientific statement, but my experience is that often that is how life works. We spend so much time responding and reacting way more than we do initiating. So my challenge to you, dear listener, would be to live in that 10%. To spend more time today, this week, initiating rather than just responding. It'll put you on the front foot rather than on the defensive. It'll help you do what you want to do rather than what you feel you ought to and have to do. And I promise you that if we can initiate more than we respond, we will live a more purposeful and positive life. Chuck Swindoll said, "Life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it." So listener, live in that 10% today.
Excellent. Well said, Andy. We sure hope you've enjoyed this episode of the What's Up Castleberry podcast, a casual conversation about our community. This podcast is produced by Robin Kepi. For more information, please check out our website, Facebook page, Instagram, or podcast feed, all with the name What's Up Castleberry. Like and subscribe, invite a friend to join the conversation, and rate and review us. Until next time, we hope you have a great week.